What's up YouTube? Welcome to today's video, which is going to be a anti-Venom mask build. I figured since I'd already done Carnage and Venom, why not go ahead and do anti-Venom as well, and probably some others in the future coming up here. And there will be a link in the description if you would like to download some free patterns from Facebook for this. I am putting this up for free as a thank you to everyone who helped me reach 2,000 subscribers. And without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump right into the build. Okay, so I started off by assembling the various pieces for my pattern for this and scaling it up a bit because I wanted it a little bit bigger than the size it is. The size it comes when you print it out, if you decide to go that route, is 22 inches easily, 23 inches really tight. I wanted this a little bigger because I hope to put LEDs in it. So I traced out one, cut it out, then flipped it over and traced out and cut out the other. And the type of foam I'm using is 5/16 inch EVA foam mats. And this isn't much thicker than the 5mm, but it is denser. It'll be a little bit hard for me to heat form compared to the 5, but that's okay. The only part where I'm really putting a lot of definition is going to be the back plate behind this, where I'm going to put in some brow definition and other things. So that's not a big deal for now. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start to glue together all these V-cuts, like these two. I'm going to glue together the eye portion here, and all these other V-cuts, and this one right here. This is part of the actual jaw. This does not get glued shut, just this. And to glue all these, I'm going to be using DAP's Weldwood contact cement. Now that I have all the V-cuts glued together, it starts to give it some of its shape. Of course, the rest I'm going to have to heat and form into it with the heat gun, but before we get into that, get too far ahead, I'm going to apply contact cement around the inside seams here, allow that to sit for 15 minutes, and then join the two halves together into one. Now, whenever I glue both sides together, I tend to start with the back here, and I start by matching up the two seam lines here. Where I had to glue the V-cuts together, and then from there I just roll it all the way around and back down and make sure all these lines here match up whenever I glue them together, and that will assure that the mask is even all the way down to the teeth. Same thing on the bottom. Match this up here and this next, and then push the rest of it together where I have the contact cement. Now you'll notice, now that it's put together, it's kind of just an ugly amorphous blob. And to shape this, and to do things like get this point and this center part here out, I'm going to be using a Drill Master heat gun. These are relatively inexpensive. And to assist in this process, I have a canvas mannequin head. Now I don't know exactly where to purchase these and don't have a purchase link. Sorry. Mine was donated by my fiance's aunt, who does a lot of sewing and had at one point a full old school mannequin that went with it, and that was the head. I don't suggest using styrofoam for heat forming for obvious reasons, because the styrofoam will melt and or catch fire from the heat of the heat gun. Now you can use a hairdryer on high sometimes to heat and shape foam, but it takes so much longer to get the foam hot, for one thing, and with thicker foam like this mat, you kind of definitely do need a heat gun to do that. And to start this off, by heating the foam, it naturally shrinks a little bit anyways, but once you start heating it and pressing it, and I will be heating it as well inside as outside, you can see back here, no heating, no pressing, still a point. Come up here, and you'll notice it's nice and rounded right where I heated it. And this is how I'll go through and round out these points here, because they're just kind of sticking out flat right now, and it looks goofy, it doesn't look right. So I'm going to pull out the brow area and the nose area, and shape the gums, and kind of the cheekbone area up in here, and the temple, and the jaw, because as it is, the jaw looks, turn this sideways, pretty goofy. You have a ridiculous underbite. Once I start putting the shaping into this, it will pull everything into shape. Okay, so I've been going through and heating this and rounding it out, and you can see here it is getting much more rounded all through the back area. I've taken out all the points from where these seams were glued together and heated around them and smoothed them out so it has a nice round appearance. Same thing here too. I heated this whole area on both sides and using my hand once it was warm, good and hot, to curve and flex it down with the actual shape of the rest so this wasn't sticking out. And then here, right into here, I added a little bit of a bump kind of to define a brow area where a pseudo nose would be if Venom had a pronounced nose, which it does not. And also heated and curved this part down here too, so that it's nice and round and no longer flat and gives it some good shape. And you'll notice it's angled pretty sharply on both sides, but when it gets out to the front here, it's still pretty flat. I have to do some more curving on these teeth. What I haven't done anything on is the jaw yet, really. The jaw, of course, right now looks like some kind of goofy underbite bear trap. However, once I get done heating it and pulling it into place, it is going to look much more like an actual Venom jaw. But for now, let's see as it gradually opens back up, it just looks kind of goofy. I'm going to need the heating and shaping to done much of work here on the jaw. Let me just pull this off. I did actually have to adjust the angle here, but I did change it in the final pattern, so you don't have to worry about that and it won't affect your build. But to show what I did here in the front, I got it pretty hot on the inside here. And then flattened this area right through here where this seam is. That's what this seam is for, and what that V-cut is for, is to cause it to go in here. And of course this other seam is to cause it to round off. And I've been working on heating this and flattening this out to give it an actual front of the chin, which helps the jaw to still overextend past the front, but not too much that it looks ridiculous or goofy. And that's where a lot of that space was coming from, is that this wasn't shaped properly. So you have that excess jaw just kind of hanging out. And then I heated it right here and pushed it inwards a little bit, and then heated on the sides and curved it. And now that I've got a general shape both in the jaw and around the eyes, I have this nice and curved like I showed you before. I got all this nice and curved. Then I start to work on up close and detailed things. Now maybe you can see this upon first glance, and maybe it's going to require me pointing this out to you. But looking at this, can you see the difference in sides? It's subtle, but I'll show you. Little things. The teeth on this side I've already heated on the outside and begin to curve in. And these are still pretty much standing up and down straight. So those are the little things I'm talking about, which is where I'm going to heat a small area at a time and just do some detail shaping and detail work. And this is what's really going to bring a plain and flat pattern to life whenever you do little touches like this. So I just heat up 3-4 teeth at a time. And then I go ahead and just give it a gentle curve with my hands while it's hot. And that makes those teeth curve in, which starts to give it a much nicer shape and look versus something that's very flat and jagged and just kind of jack-o'-lantern-esque. Okay, so I got a little brave on that one. Instead of just doing 2 or 3, I decided to try to do a whole roll, like 6 or 7. Oh yeah, that's still working out quite nicely. So yeah, things like that help to just give the jaw and everything else its shape, and help to pull it all into place and make it look more lifelike and less cartoonish, even though that is what I'm going for, of course, because this is based off the original comic run and not off anything new. And the same thing up here with the front teeth. You can see I curved this side in, but did not do this side. There's a slight curve from when I was curving this, but I need to actually hit up the teeth now. They will actually match up on both sides with the curvature. Too much. Did a little bit too much, but with a little spot of heat, it helped to just even all that right out so that both sides now have a pretty even slope. And I will go through just doing a little bit at a time like that now that I get the overall thing done. And then too, the jaw seems to be slightly more over on this side than on this side. Not by much, we're talking 1/4 of an inch, but heating that side and just kind of gently moving it over into place. This is the perfect time for all the final last minute heat adjustments like that as you're doing your patterns. I also heated and kind of pushed it in back behind the jaw area right here. And yeah, looking at reference photos as well always helps, as well as say things like action figures or 3D imaging art, things like that. If you can find through Google searches, will help you to add in your own unique details, separate from anything even I've done here to make your projects look even better than mine. Okay, and I pretty much finished up all of my minute heating details, which was actually just tweaking this a little more, pulling this in a little bit, and heating it and squeezing it so it's more rounded this way. That way I can help to make more of a brow area later. And like I said, curved in the teeth, evened out the jaw, just did things like that I could to make it as realistic as possible by molding the foam. And next, what I have here is the eyepieces. These are not going to go on the outside, they're going to go on the inside. And I cut these a little bit bigger, so wherever your eyes may set, you can move them up and down a little bit and adjust them as you need to. And you'll notice it has these cuts here. I've already applied contact cement to both sides, and I'm going to go ahead and glue these together, which will already start to round it. I will then heat and shape it with my heat gun in my hands. Okay, I glued them together, and this one you can see, even not glued, has some curvature to it, just because pulling this gap together causes the foam to curve. But after I heated it, I not only curved it in general like this, I went back through and focused on specific areas, like right here, where I heated this and bent it to give it more of an eye and sort of cheekbone shape to it. So whenever I glue it in from the back side, it will have a much more realistic look. Okay, so I glued both of these in, and first of all I had to put the mask on my head and kind of hold them in place from the inside, which was pretty awkward, just to figure out round about where I needed it to be so I could see out of it whenever it's on my head. That is, of course, rather important. You need to be able to see out of it. Next thing is, I did heat and expand the eyes a little bit more. In this case, I'm actually sacrificing a visual effect that I wanted, just so that I can have better vision, basically. So I did cut these a little bigger, so I could have better vision. I usually actually don't do that. I usually end up being able to not see as well, so that I can have a better looking end result. And the next thing I've done, you may have already noticed just from looking at this, is the bottom teeth. I begin to trim and angle them in, and I just do this with a pair of scissors. And I'm just simply trimming down the front here at an angle. This one I actually needed to get a little bit better. There we go. That way the teeth have more of a visceral, curved look, which is what I want. Now the top teeth I didn't bother to do anything to, because whenever I'll be wearing this and people will be looking at me, I like the way that it looks. But the bottom just looked a little bit too jack-o'-lantern, and I wanted them to curve back more. So I had an option of heating them, but they're still going to be flat. And I feel like you can see it and notice it a lot more looking at the bottom than you do looking at the top. So that is why I did that. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is cover the mouth from the inside. Now there's several ways you can do this that I'm going to suggest, and there's probably even more than this that you could possibly come up with yourself. I'm going to use foam, but you could use any sort of mesh or netting, like tulle, for example, is a fabric that you could put behind there, several layers of it, just to help cover up your face while you're wearing it. I'm actually going to use 3mm foam, but you could also use cloth and anything like that, and those things as well, whether it's mesh or a cloth of some type or a sheer fabric. You can still airbrush or dry brush and paint on those just fine, just like you would with foam. So you don't have to do this. You can fill yours in any way that you choose. I am, of course, using 3mm foam, and I have a sheet here for example. I did some measurements, but what I ultimately ended up doing was holding it up against the cowl and just taking a marker and drawing a rough line where I thought it would go on both sides, low and high. And then I double-checked my work by putting it on the inside, and it is, of course, much bigger than the gap, which is good for two reasons. One, I'm going to need something to glue this to the inside. The other one is I'm going to heat this with a heat gun and just completely and totally fold and wrinkle and stretch this up so that it looks like kind of like some crazy gnarly fleshy webbing on the inside whenever I'm done. Keeping my fingers crossed. If you've seen the Carnage mask, so I usually don't use a whole lot of black foam on film if I can avoid it. If I do, I like to have something to juxtapose it against. It's a secondary reason why I brought out this red piece of foam, was so that I had something in the background that I could put this on so you could just see just how much I beat this up and wrinkled it. It's a lot. And after I went through and folded it up like this, I took and stretched it to curve it as much as I could to make it somewhat concaved. And then I went through just by pinching with both hands and pulling and just stretching all these little lines and things into it just to make it look as crazy as possible. I liked Carnage, but I felt afterwards that I wish I would have done the mouth a little different, a little better. But that's what you get from experience. You do things over and over again and you learn new things and you get better. So I'm going to go ahead and glue this on the inside and trim it down as needed, but just wanted to show you real quick what it looked like. Okay, I got the mouth here in. It does fit. I am more happy with this than with the Carnage, but I still think there's probably more limits I could stretch and heat and shape the foam to, but that'll be a learning experience for a further project. Now, if this is all done, the next couple things I'm going to do is going to be sanding all these seams. I'm going to use a Dremel, but you can hand sand if you don't have one or don't want to spend the money on one. I don't blame you. It is kind of an investment. But if you happen to have power tools or anything like belt sander on a medium grit to start and then maybe a fine grit, I would be careful the speed that you put it at and how much pressure you put on this, because it will gouge out the foam. If you're worried about that, you can just hand sand it. I would start with a medium grit, probably somewhere around, say, 300 range, 250, 350, somewhere in between there or around there is pretty good to start with. If you have a really bad spot, like for example, show you up close on camera one of my mistakes. This edge right here is pretty bad. I did not line that up well whenever I glued it. I'm going to sand this out, and hopefully you won't be able to tell afterwards, but, you know, for the right here and now, it just looks bad because you can see it. If it's a big chunk like that, you can always use a heavier grit sandpaper. And for larger areas, for example, after I use the Dremel, I will hand sand. For these larger areas, to make large strokes, I generally end up using a sanding block and not sanding paper itself. For small areas where I'm trying to work out something that's maybe a little bit of a lip, I will use the paper. Okay, so I've gone through and done the sanding on the mask here, and apparently got EVA foam dust everywhere. But just did all the seams, and I angled off these edges here, which in a sense is kind of makes the eyes bigger. I don't know if they seem too small or too high, but much like the Carnage mask, this is getting carved down. I'm going to do a little more, particularly on the bottom section here, not so much on the top, but I want to pop in and show you what I've done so far. And I've also sanded all the seams, and to do this, to this point, Dremel. Now, instead of filming a time lapse this time, I decided to take a quick second to explain what I do to this. If you're interested, if not, just skip ahead at 30 seconds or so. I got a piece of scrap foam here to show you. Now, if you take the Dremel and apply direct steady pressure, it's going to gouge this, okay? So whenever I do it, I'm just zip, 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 kind of just going right along and tagging it essentially with this whole thing. I don't at any point ever really put a lot of direct force on any of this kind of stuff. With this mannequin head here. Okay, so I've got this weight in place. So just like that. Small, smooth, very light, very even passes. And I just go down and do like an inch, half inch or so at a time like that. I don't just go and the whole thing. If I did that, it would get gouged. I get a lot of comments on Instagram about people gouging their foam. And yes, you totally will. If you put your Dremel rotary tool on high, or if you don't have an adjustable one, I usually keep mine around between 15 and 20, depending. And the higher I put it, the more it gouges the foam and just wants to rip into it. So, if you put steady pressure, for even just a split second like that, I just put a little bit of pressure and it just gouged straight into it. That's what it will do to the foam. The Dremel will grip it and it'll right into it, just like that. So, even, steady, careful strokes are always much better. Okay, I've finished the sanding, and I have rounded this down some, and you'll notice this stuff here, which is just hot glue. I took to fill in the gap between the angle that I sanded and this piece. I could have just gone ahead and sanded it down flush, but I didn't want to risk running the sanding head into this and gouging it up. So I sanded it, there was somewhat of a gap, and I filled it with that. And now I have some puffy 3D paint. I picked this up at Walmart. It is rather inexpensive. I think it was $3 or $4 for this big 4 1/4 ounce bottle, which is pretty good. And there's still a bit of gap in between the hot glue and this black piece. So I'm just going to start filling that in. Now, as this puffy paint dries, it does shrink up. So even if I have a bit of a bulge or a lump going in between the hot glue and my 3mm black eyepiece here, it's going to shrink up and even out. I'm ultimately most likely going to go over this with some silicone too. And once I get that done, much like on the Carnage mask, I'm going to start drawing in some eye details and some teeth details, same as I did there, before covering up these seams and sealing and painting. Okay, so as you can see, I've taken my puff paint and just went kind of crazy all over this thing. All this stuff is going to be covered over and painted ultimately, so to an extent it is not relevant as you're looking at it right now, aside from seeing what I did, which I just kind of scribbled all over it, starting from this direction and going out. Made some brow lines here, traced around the border of both eyes, and then put texture and stuff in here. Once I actually seal this and paint it and put the lenses in, I'm going to do some final things coming up off the lenses with the puff paint to kind of blend it all in from the eyes out. But for right now, this is pretty much going to be it. Also did the bottom and the teeth as well. Texturing or not texturing is up to you. The other thing this acts as is a line. This is where the white's going to stop and the black paint is going to start, if that makes sense. So this is also a visual representation of where I'm going to ultimately paint, which is a nice, helpful thing, because once I seal it and primer it, I have a line that is three-dimensional that comes through where I can see exactly where I need to start and stop. Now the next issue is, of course, these seams. And I've already started to fill them with a silicone latex product called Alex Plus from a company called DAP. Now they make two kinds. One is fast dry and one is not. What I have is not the fast dry. The fast dry, obviously by the name, dries faster, but it's also easy to sand, whereas this is not. And the fast dry dries white. This dries clear. As you can see here, you can't see anything. And it's a little harder to tell whenever you've got it filled. I just happen to like this stuff because I don't really have to sand it. I've gotten so accustomed to doing this that I can just fill the gaps with it and then use water to smooth over it. Now, to show you exactly what I do here, since I already did it on the mask, and because that's hard to film and be very time consuming and pointless in a time lapse, is I glued two pieces of foam together here. And if you'll notice, this part has a bit of a lip going this way, and this part does not. Now I'm going to use the silicone here to fill it. Now mind you, this has not been sanded. These have been sanded and are much easier to fill, but I want to show you on a hard gap just for sake of demonstration. So get some of my silicone here. This stuff comes in a tube, and you need a caulking gun to get it out, but I just put it in the Tupperware and I use my finger to spread it on. So I'm going to start applying some, working into this edge here, and then I'm going to start evening it out as I work my way up. Okay, once you do that, you can dip your finger in just regular old tap water, and once you have your finger wet, you can use that to help smooth it out. And the reason why I use this particular brand and this particular type is that it is water-based, and it is very compatible with thinning down and watering out. I'll work that rest up into the seam. Okay, Now you can see there, it's already starting to smooth out. I'll continue to dip my finger into the water and then run it over it until I get it nice and smooth and even. And like I say, as it dries, it does dry clear. So once it's done, I kind of have to feel, make sure, did I really feel the gap? Is there still a bump? If so, I'll go through and apply a little bit more. Okay, all my silicone looks pretty good, and in a couple areas it was, and I added a little bit more. However, down here on the teeth, I added a whole lot more puffy paint because I really want them to stand out more. And that first initial layer not only absorbs into the foam somewhat, but it just shrinks itself. And I'm showing you this now because when I come back, it's going to be when it's fully dry. And I want you to see just how much this stuff dries up. Okay, so I don't know how much is going to show up on camera, but here it is after 18 hours of drying. Now, I checked it after 8 hours of drying because the puff paint states that it takes 4 to 6 hours to dry. And I think that's true if you have maybe what they would consider a normal sized amount, but I globbed this up pretty thick on the teeth here. So by the time it actually managed to dry, well, it took much longer than that. That's okay, I had to go to work anyways, so that's fine. But now that this is all done, I'm going to go ahead and start to plasti dip this up. I just finished plasti dipping this, and I did apply it on rather heavily to the point where, yeah, it is actually dripping off. But I have this problem with the white they don't have with the black or the other colors, where there's just certain little pock marks that don't want to fill. But I wanted to forego the whole aspect of having to plasti dip it gray or black, which I never have, like I say, problems with those colors, and then paint it white. Didn't want to do that. I'm being lazy. So I use white plasti dip. Whoa! Okay, so I took some black plasti dip and just kind of dusted the face and left some overspray. But you'll notice the overspray is grayish because I took more white and went over that. Alright, I put some Createx opaque black in my airbrush now that I have let this sit and cure long enough. And I'm going to start filling all this black in. Alright, now that I've done a general airbrushing, I want to go through and bring all these lines out. And to do that, I'm going to use a brush, and it has some testors model paint in black. You can use any paint that you wish. I just happen to have this, and I happen to like it. Next, I'm going to use some Createx transparent red that I added in with some water to thin it out, and also put in some regular opaque red as well, just to give it a little bit more of an appearance whenever I use it. Okay, so I have all this stuff finished up with the hand painting and the highlighting, which, you know, like I said, I had to do a couple layers to get that color. And I've slapped some LEDs just kind of sitting in there for right now, just to give you an idea, hopefully, what it's going to look like. And for the lenses, I'm going to use these goggles that I picked up from a thrift store. And they're already tinted red, so I'm going to pop this out and cut out shapes that'll fit behind here and glue those in. Right, I got my lenses in, and I glued them in with contact cement. And now that that's done, I'm going to go back through and use my puffy paint again. This time to bridge up the top of the eye here and help kind of run the texture up into this a little bit, just to help even it out and make it look a little bit more natural per se, and a little bit less like an actual lens. Alright, and here it is after I've applied my puffy paint, and I put it pretty thick along this rim here and then just kind of went up. I also used it to redefine certain thin points of certain details. And here's the other side. You can see as well what I did with the puffy paint. And I'm showing it to you now as it's wet, and next time whenever I come back to show you the next clip will be after it's dry, so you can see how much it shrunk and how it looks after drying. Okay, so this is still not quite dry yet. It's only had about 4 hours. But looking at this overall, the plasti and the paint, etc., as I move this around in the light, you see the light hit it on the white as well as on the black. It all has about the same level of gloss, and it's not a high gloss, but it's not matte either, and I'm actually pretty happy with it. But in the mouth here, particularly on these red highlighted areas, I'd like to have a little more of a glossy finish. And a quick and inexpensive way that I'm going to do that is to use some gloss Mod Podge and a number 4 paintbrush. You don't have to use a number 4, I just happen to have that, and it's about the size that I want and need. And since it's flat on one side and thin on the other, it gives me a little bit more control too. But mostly just the fact that it's handy. It's kind of the main reason. And I really want this, they say, on the areas that are more raised, where the red is more prevalent. So that whenever the light hits it, it'll pick it up a little bit more in that area and a little bit less in black. Okay, now that this is all dried, I've gone ahead and added in the LED lights. Move this up off the mannequin head as much as possible here. And I've hooked them up. And what I've used for this is these LED light sets. They run on 2 AA batteries. They come in different colors. These are blue, these are red. I got these for $1. That's awfully inexpensive. So, spoiler alert to anybody that was expecting something uber extravagant. But yes, this is a nice, quick, and convenient way to put lights in your mask. And to put these in, I simply used strips of 2mm EVA craft foam to hold them in place, and I used super glue to bond it in. I didn't use contact cement, that takes too long, and since, you know, it is such a small area, I didn't see much point in doing anything else. Now you'll notice that I have the batteries, or not the batteries, but the lights literally just taped down to the back here. Well, not taped down, but glued down with the EVA foam. I considered cutting them and removing them and just twisting the wires together or soldering it, but I just didn't have the time or did not want to do the effort. The other thing is, this battery pack, of course, hangs out of the back. It would be laid underneath a neck piece, which would then, of course, have like a bodysuit or something going over it if I decided to cosplay as a full thing. Now, if you don't want this battery pack hanging out, there is a simple solution, and that is make the mask big enough that you can put it inside. I had enough room that I probably could have like wound it around and put it in the chin, but I didn't want it all that weight in the front pulling it down. It already has a lot of weight in the chin as is from all this stuff up here, so it helped kind of balance it out for me. Another option would be just to go to someplace like Walmart, and they have these little hat clip lights that are meant to clip onto the bill of a hat, and they cost about $1 each. I'm certain you could find something similar online, though, if you looked. And of course, now that the mask is all together, the only thing left for me to do is try it on. You guys can see how it looks on me. And the red's pretty decent. Of course, you can't see my eyes through it. You could obscure this with something like tulle. But overall, I am pretty happy with the way that it looks and how it came out. It fits good. It's a very thorough appearance, and overall I'm pretty stoked on it and can't wait to put it up. Alright, that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this video. And as always, thanks for making it to this point, or if you just skipped ahead, I am giving away this Predator Biomask, which I made in a previous video. If you would like to enter to win this, just leave a comment below. It can be any comment. Leave a comment and like the video and subscribe to the channel, and you will be entered into this contest. Now, the drawing itself will be on October 25th, Thursday, 2018, at 8 p.m. Mountain Time. I will live stream it. So, if you would like to enter, and make sure you check out the live stream or the saved video afterwards. And as always, thank you everyone for watching, and thank you for all the support. And thank you for helping to get me to 2,000 subscribers. I really do appreciate it. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. And if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. It does help the channel. If you would like to see more videos like this, turn on the bell for notifications. And as always, good luck with your builds, and have a great day.